Good afternoon and
Hello.
welcome to Tech Bugs Rock Roll. Bugs, rock, bugs, more rock, more bugs, more tech, some bugs, some rock. The only thing I haven't had this week is roll. I don't think I've had any rolls. I had a bap, I had a baguette, I had some very good sandwiches. And the random
hot cross buns. I had a sub. That's what I had from Greg's.
Is a sub a roll? Tell us in the comments.
Yeah, there you go.
So I just like
important issues being dealt with.
I just like to take a moment to acknowledge that it's becoming generally accepted that the word chat is the first fourth person collective pronoun in the English language. Yeah. Because so how's it going? Chat is basically breaking the fourth wall. It's a sort of I'm sending this inquiry to a group of people who I don't know who they are, but some of them might be able to respond. Hello, Joel. Hello, Bogdan. Hello, Origami Marie. You are chat. Welcome, chat. How's it going, chat?
Hello, chat.
Now I'm gonna keep using this.
Gonna start doing that in talks.
Yeah.
When I'm speaking to an audience, and I'm just going to go. So the thing is, chat.
Yes. And only time will tell. And by time here, I probably mean about 72 hours. Yeah. Or so Marie says rolls are either rolled or have a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. So like a burger bun is a roll, but a submarine roll is not actually a roll because it's shaped like a submarine, and a submarine is not roll shaped. Hey, Danny, how's it going? So yeah, now within like a week, either like people like you and I saying chat will make it the worst thing ever and it'll be cringe and no one will ever do it again, or it'll just become part of the vernacular and it's normal. And
when you say people like you and I, do you mean old out of touch people who don't know?
Well, I'm trying to picture what would happen if you were to go downstairs and say to your children, "What's up, chat?" And whether the response of teenagers would be, "Oh God, no, it's not cool anymore."
I'm going to try that. After I've gone and picked up half of chat from school, I will bring him home and then I will run the experiment.
So Joel says it's better than being Chet. Chet is one of those names that for me means one of three things. It's either Chet Atkins, the finger-picking guitar player, who's legend, or it's Chet Morton from the Hardy Boys books. There was a character. Oh, yeah, I grew up on those. Or it's Chet from Weird Science, who got turned into a big goblin thing at the end, which was brilliant.
That's my go-to Chet.
Rest in peace, Bill Paxton. We love your work. Anyway, let's do a podcast, shall we? That sounds like a fun thing to do. It's been a week.
Last week, we had a question.
Yes.
From somebody right at the end. I've just got to go and find the video and then find the chat replay.
For those of you listening on the radio, Mark is trying to find a thing. There is a reason in Hollywood that computers all make typing noises and they go beep and they often have voiceovers, which is that if there is no audio, the audience thinks everything is broken and they stop paying attention. So when they write people interacting with computer terminals in Hollywood movies, they actually write it as dialogue and the computer has lines. And
I completely can't find the question.
What was the question last week? Well, there was a question right at the end. Somebody asked the question. Good? Is agile any good? Yes. So the problem with anything being any good, so there are two answers to everything. One is something called Sturgeon's Law. Theodore Sturgeon was a science fiction author during the Golden Age and was once asked in an interview, would you agree that 90% of science fiction is crap? And he said, yes, it is, because 90% of everything is crap.
Yes.
And I think about Sturgeon's Law a lot, because whenever, so next week we're going to be in Norway doing a bunch of things. We're going to be doing talks and workshops and live concerts and all kinds of things. And it's very, very difficult. One of the things that I have realized as I get older, one of the things that I sort of struggle to rationalize with the most is normally when you start doing a new thing, you're on a sort of constant positive curve. And so every time you do it, it's better than last time. And every time you do it, it's an improvement. And then you get to the point where for the first time you do one that's worse than last time. And you think, well, what happened? Was it my fault? And, you learn from those experiences. You're like, okay, I cut a corner I shouldn't have cut, or I should have checked that beforehand. And so it becomes part of your process. But eventually you get to a point where you do everything right and it's still a crapshoot. And it's still, you turn up. So let's talk about music, for example. You turn up, you're rehearsed, you've got great songs, you've slept properly, and you don't have a cold, and everything is fine. And just it isn't that good. And afterwards, you're like, what happened? What went wrong?
Yeah.
And, I sort of remind myself of Sturgeon's law. To get a great show, you have to do 10, and one of them will be good, because 90% of everything is crap. And to get a really good show, you have to do 100, because 90% of the good shows are still not amazing. And
I think when I was putting down my bass lines for the videos that we're doing, because we've all been busy recording things and using a Mac because they are better for that. And yeah, I would estimate that I did 10, maybe 15 attempts at each bass line. Certainly key for the Wi-Fi, because that's quite challenging. It's got a couple of twiddly bits.
So it
took me at least 10 goes to get a usable take.
The solo one of the songs in our set is a cover of Enter Sandman about open and free software. It's called Enter Stallman. And that one has been, it's like when people say, I've been working on that for about 5 years. I kind of have. Like, it was probably 2018, 2019 when I opened up a Logic file and started poking around and with some lyrics and things. And it's one of those ones that made it into the set, and then I decided I didn't like it, and I took it out, and then I figured out what was wrong with it, and now it's going to be back in. But the guitar solo on that song is just, it's Kirk Hammett, at his absolute best.
Yeah.
And trying to get even close enough that you're not embarrassing yourself. It's not note perfect. Ain't gonna happen. I am not Mr. Hammett, and I never will be. But being able to be like, all right, well, most of the audience don't actually know all the notes, because there's about 1,000 of them. So which 500 notes do I have to play for them to not notice the ones I didn't? But anyway, going back to Agile. So Marie has just put a comment. Everyone I've ever heard say that Agile's the best has included the assertion that if it isn't the best for you, you're doing it wrong. And I noticed that in Marie's comment, they spelled Agile with a capital A.
Yes.
And this is something I think is interesting. Agile is, to me, Agile and Scrum and all these kinds of things, they were formulated as... if you were doing worse than that, they could get you doing better. And if you were already doing better than that, they had nothing to offer you.
Yes.
And, it's like if I switched to eating my fried chicken sandwiches on brown bread instead of white, that would be a health improvement, even though fried chicken sandwiches are not healthy.
Yeah.
And so you need to, I think Agile has a lot of good ideas. NASA landed on the moon using waterfall software. So, you can talk all you want about the merits of doing it. The problem with waterfall is that it's very, very expensive, and you need incredibly clever people to get it right. And ideally, you need requirements that aren't going to change, which we don't really have anymore, ever.
No, that's not a thing that happens. But no, I mean, so NASA put people on the moon using waterfall because they had to.
Yeah.
Because they were managing, was it 400,000 people in total worked on the moon program? And
anyone ever pulls out the whole moon landing conspiracy, it's like, can you imagine 400,000 people ever agreeing on anything, let alone to keep secret the biggest hoax of the last century? No.
But then you look at SpaceX, who have done a thing today that I'm going to talk about later. And that is Agile. That's agile rocket building and iterative improvement and stuff. Their sprints are quite long. If you say that the sort of retrospective for their sprint is chucking it up in the sky and seeing what happens. But it is a very agile approach to doing it. They have blown up a lot of rockets, and that's how they work. And that works too, but it is also very expensive.
One very interesting thing that NASA did with the moon landings, you know, I'm a great fan of looking at the engineering and the ideas behind the moon landings, because I think it's a project where 400,000 people and none of them wanted to be the one who screwed it up. And I think that is something we have never seen, you know, with the possible exception of, you know, wars and military operations and things. I don't think we've ever seen that many people all being like, well, I don't want my bit to go wrong. Yeah. And they had this timeline of, you know, they had to get to the moon by the end of this decade, because the product owner said that, and then someone shot him. And so he wasn't around for them to go, what about 1975, Jack? Can we get a bit more? So they had to hit it, you know, and they had this whole testing program, and I can't remember the guy's name. It was the NASA flight director in the 1960s, Chris Kraft, maybe, said, what's the likelihood that any of these components will fail testing? And they went, I don't know, 2%. And they went, right, put all the components together, build a rocket and launch it. And if the rocket explodes, it means one of the parts failed the test. And if the rocket doesn't explode, then we've just certified 6 million components in half an hour, and we can all get on with our day. And they did. It's called all-up testing. And it shaved years off the schedule from, you know, JFK's speech to actually Armstrong and Aldrin landing in the Sea of Tranquility. And, you know, I think about that with regards to software testing. Like, we got all these unit tests, but it doesn't work. And you're like, well, when was the last time you built the rocket and saw if it went up today? And Elon's favorite moon landing conspiracy was that it was a hoax, but they hired Spielberg and he demanded they shoot on location. I'm going to nitpick the joke because I know it's Eli, because it wasn't Spielberg, it was Kubrick, because Spielberg wasn't old enough to be making films when they landed on the moon, but Kubrick was and would have done that.
Yes.
So there we go. The joke is funnier now.
Shoot the opening scene of 2001: A Space Odyssey on the moon. So there was Apollo 11, 12, not 13 didn't make it, 14, 15, 16, 17. And then there's lots of conspiracy theories about Apollo 18. But the simple answer to that is it was Stanley Kubrick and a film crew going out there to shoot the opening bit of 2001.
That was a great movie. As somebody who used to be really into movie special effects, the practical effects they did, you know, some of them, they had rotating sets so they could simulate zero gravity. The whole set would rotate and the camera with it. So it looked like someone was walking on the ceiling. But then 2 seconds later, they've just stuck a pen onto a bit of glass. So it looks like it's floating. It was, you know, we have really lost something with CGI is amazing. And, you know, the ability for a director to go, can we have a giant dragon fly out of a cup of coffee and turn into a badger? And they go, yeah, we can do that. You know, it's great. But practical effects, you know, Star Wars 2001, silent running, all those kinds of things. It is just, you know, the level of, right, we're not making a movie, we're making one shot. It is 2.4 seconds long, and a spaceship has to fly in from over here, turn left and blow up. And that would be a 3-day job. They're like, right, what's the next shot? And when you watch Star Wars and movies like that really closely, you can see the cuts where, you know, 1 second the Millennium Falcon is a 2-meter long model, and the next second it's a 2-inch long model, and the next second it's a ping pong table with battleship kits on it. It's wonderful.
Have you seen this? I think it's probably the extras on the re-release or something of episode 4, and it's got the trench that they used to shoot the final kind of act, and cameras that kind of run along inside it, and X-wings on wires and all this sort of stuff. And it's just because I find, I don't know about you, I watch movies now like Marvel movies or whatever, and there's like a blob monster with a single eye and tentacles chasing Doctor Strange up the side of a building. And CGI is so good, and the way they integrate it with the surroundings and the actors and the shadows and the lighting and everything, it's so right that you forget that that's not a real thing really doing that. You just you completely accept that there is a tentacled monster.
Yeah, there was definitely
very strange.
a window, and this window is probably most of my life as a someone who watches movies, where the effects were definitely still effects, but they were good anyway, and you enjoyed them as that.
Sorry, I have to object. Eli's pushing their luck. I assume this is talking about 2001. It's an astonishing feat of some really incredible effects and beautiful music that combine to make the mostly mind-numbingly boring film. Okay, I'm not going to object. I thought that said when it was just in small, I thought it said the most mind-numbingly boring film, and I was going to protest and say that is in fact Tarka the Otter.
No, Blair Witch Project.
It is. I will accept that So how long is the docking sequence? It basically uses the whole of the Blue Danube.
It's the whole of the Blue Danube. It's about 2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes, and it's just a ship coming into dock. And when you're outside the ship, there's no rocket noise or anything. It's one of the things that Kubrick was very kind of deliberate about, is when the camera is floating in space, there will be no sound, because there isn't, and realism. But no, it has moments of dull.
Yeah.
But no, so the thing, agile, because we're talking about agile, we keep getting distracted.
No, we're responding to change, and we're following a plan.
Yes, yeah. So the thing is, the people who wrote the Agile Manifesto, your Kent Becks and all those guys, they were working on...
And they were all guys. Every single signatory of the Agile Manifesto is a Caucasian man.
And was it C2 or something? The name of the thing they were building? It was some... something numbing. I don't know what language they were using, what it was running on. It was probably something to do with IBM mainframes and everything. And they did this project, and when they wanted to know more information or check if something was okay, they went and asked the person who was going to be using the software. And when they needed to plan things out, they kind of did it a week at a time and went, well, I'm going to work on this bit, you work on that bit, nobody can work on that bit because we need that bit first. And it was kind of moving, probably not post-it notes, because I'm not sure they had post-it notes yet, and it worked, and they delivered this thing, and they delivered it under time and under budget, and it worked, and it had tests and all this sort of thing. And then they tried to write down what they had done so that other people could try the same approach. And then what happened when good idea meets real world, and particularly when we're talking about real world, which has got sort of local managers and then middle management and then upper management and then vice presidents and then a C-suite, is you can't just go, well, we're going to kind of do this and we'll see how it goes and stuff. And so you have to layer all this pro forma stuff on top of it. And so we've ended up, I don't think the original Agile team were sat round a table playing bloody planning poker. And having the person, I don't think they had somebody who was in charge of there not being anybody in charge, which is pretty much the job description of a Scrum Master. And there's quite a long bit about this in my Albatross project talk next week.
Yes.
And planning poker in particular, you get Fibonacci numbers is a 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. If it's more than 13, it needs splitting up. But every time I've ever joined a team or started up a team and we've got a Scrum Master in, and they talk about how do you want to size your stories? Do you want to use Fibonacci numbers? Do you want to use t-shirt sizes? Lots of different ways of doing it. And you kind of go, all right, so it's a 3 or whatever. But they're constantly saying it's not time. You're not estimating how many hours it's going to take you, which is crap. Because at the end of the day, you've got a week and there are 40 hours in a week. And then you take 6 or 7 of those off for the meetings that Scrum requires instead of doing actual work. So you're probably talking about actively 30 hours a week. And so if you've got 2 people let's say, just to make it easy, that's 60 hours. And so if you say you can do 60 points in a week, then a point is an hour. It just is.
Yeah.
And so, because next week, if you say you're going to do 60 points, then that means you're going to do a point an hour. And they need to stop pretending that we're not going. So Agile, I actually did work on one project and I changed it and I said, right, the minimum amount of time anything can take to be done properly, including code review, commenting it, documenting it, all the sort of housekeeping, everything is half a day. And so your choices are half a day, 1 day, 2 days, and more than 2 days, I think we had. But if people find it really, really easy to look at a task and go, yeah, I can do that in half a day. I can do that before lunch and I can do that after lunch. That's easy. If you're saying to that same person, oh, is it a small t-shirt or a medium t-shirt? If it's an extra large t-shirt, it needs to go back to the t-shirt. And you're just like, shut up. I'm not 5.
Yeah.
So yes, I think Agile can work. I think Agile can be good. I prefer it when it's spelled with a little a.
Yeah, I mean the whole, the
90,
the tenets of
90%.
The tenets of Agile. You can look at the Agile manifesto and say, all right, how are we, when we have problems to solve, how do we discuss them to find a solution? And the Agile manifesto says face-to-face conversation is the most effective way of communicating information. Yeah. And some teams are like, well, yeah, we know that, but it's not actually effective when there's a 3-hour train ride in order to have a face-to-face conversation. So we'll do it on Zoom, or we'll do it on Slack, or we'll do it on blog posts, or we'll do it with GitHub issues,
Yeah.
There are successful teams shipping software who violate every single tenet of that manifesto in one way or another, and it doesn't seem to slow them down. And, I think that's the team you're on is struggling and you don't know why, it's a good thing to look at and go like, all right, do we actually get to talk to our own customers? And the problem there is the whole, who is your actual customer? Because customer is such a horrible word.
Yes.
But there's somebody who can change the software, and there's somebody on the other end who is using it to do a thing. And if you don't know who that person is, and you don't know what they're using it to do, then you're going to really struggle to make them happy and productive. And some organizations have, robust enough product management that they're like, no, we've talked to 1,000 people and 600 of them would like to be able to do this thing. And please go and figure out how they can do that thing. Yeah. And, the ones where you're working with a product owner who's actually just making it up as they go along because it's what they think everybody wants. Yeah. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt and the trauma. Yeah.
But no, you could summarize, I think the single most useful part of Agile as a principle is release something as early as you can. And something that is useful, something that adds value for your target customer, and then give it to them and say, there you go, you can only do this with it so far, but it does it really well. Give us feedback.
There is that very famous cartoon of the skateboard and then the scooter and then the bicycle and then the car and then the truck. And I saw that doing the rounds for about a decade before I saw the thing which made it make sense. Because every time I looked at it, I was like, well, no, that's stupid. Like, building a bicycle is not a solution on the way to building a truck. You don't get to a truck by building a bicycle out of a skateboard. That's not how this works. And then I finally saw a version that hadn't been mangled by social media, which says the customer wants to move boxes.
Yes.
It's not anything to do with vehicles. The customer's got a load of heavy boxes, and every day they need to move a load of boxes across the yard of their depot or whatever. And so the first thing you do is, well, look, we'll give you the skateboard, and then you can move boxes tomorrow without having to carry them by hand, and that'll get you started. And then, and you can kind of see it, and without that bit of context, and that to me is, like the classic anecdote about the Fisher space pen, where it's like the Americans
Yes.
spent $100,000 designing a biro that would work in space, and the Russians used a pencil.
Yes.
And, it's the difference between we need to write in space and we need a biro that works in space. Yes. And, the Fisher space pen was a private project. NASA didn't actually come up with it, and the whole thing's a lie. And both the Russians and the Americans, or the Soviets and the Americans, used wax crayons because wax doesn't contain graphite. So if it breaks off in zero gravity, it won't drift into an electrical circuit and go fizzle.
Short something out. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, yes, agile. It's better than if what you're doing is worse than agile, and if what you're doing is better than agile, then agile won't make it better.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think there's probably a fairly strong chance that if what you're doing is working, then it probably counts as agile.
Yeah.
You're just not adhering to the tenets of a particular sect within agile, like Scrum or Kanban or whatever. You've just kind of gone, hey, this works for us, let's do it. Yeah. And I think that's, in an ideal world, that would be
people
what
and processes
figure out what works for you and do it as a team.
Yeah. You got a bunch of people, they come up with a process. As long as you have those people, that's the process. And if it works, it works.
Yes, it does.
And it stops working when you take a process that worked for one bunch of people and try to apply it to another bunch of people, because the people are different people.
They are different people.
Yeah. But that's basically what Scrum does for a job.
Yes.
Is take a set of practices distilled from observing high-functioning teams made of certain kinds of individuals solving certain kinds of problems, and go, if you do what they did, your programs will work. And it can't sit down. You need to stand up. Programs only work if you stand up.
As Origami Marie says, it's like figuring out effective elementary education techniques. The students who are set up to be fast at learning for lots of outside the classroom reasons are going to learn well in many ways. So yeah, you can't go, does this technique work on these kids? If everything works on those kids, because yes, it will. And then you go, the technique works. And then you take it away and you use it on some less lucky and privileged kids, and it's not going to work for them.
Yeah.
That reminds me of there was an initiative. It was either early this Conservative government or late in the last Labour one, and they had noticed that the smarter kids tended to come from homes where they had ready access to plenty of books.
Yeah.
And so they decided that what they needed to do was give every household in the country with 10 children, with children, 10 books. And then those children would have ready access to books, and then they would be smart. And it's the whole correlation and causation thing.
Yeah.
The kids who, there's a genetic component to intelligence. And if you have intelligent parents, then you're probably going to be a bit brighter yourself. And intelligent families, intelligent households, they tend to have books.
Yeah.
They just do. And, and I'm sure
there are two places in the world where I have actually, seen this documented as a phenomenon. One is Seattle, and the other one is Novosibirsk in Russia. And both of them are places that, so in the 60s, Boeing set up in Seattle. And Boeing basically said, if you're like really, really good at aeronautics or mechanical engineering or fluid dynamics or any of 1,000 unbelievably difficult jobs, come to Seattle and we'll pay you a lot of money to help us build airplanes. And they did. And then all of these really, really smart people met all these other really smart people at work, because there's nothing else to do in Seattle in the 1960s, and ended up, marrying their colleagues and having kids. So we're like, well, my mum and dad were both aeronautics PhDs who worked for Boeing. Of course, I grew up surrounded by books and mathematics, and suddenly, boom, you've got Microsoft, you've got the software startup scene. And then you skip another generation, and the subsequent one are like, you know what? My grandfather worked for Boeing and my father founded like a software startup. I'm going to be a grunge guitarist because there's no way I can live up to that. And that's how we got Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Duff McKagan and all that kind of stuff. And Novosibirsk in Siberia is the same. It's where the Soviet Union put all of their scientists far away from the border, where there was nothing, absolutely nothing in every direction. And I went there a couple of times in the before times when you could do that. And there's a stretch where there's 500 tech startups in like 6 kilometers of road and this amazing science park. And it's just really, really smart people who grew up, their parents were, literate engineers and chemists and metallurgists. And so were all their parents' friends. And so was everyone they knew. And they're surrounded by, books and learning resources. And I think also a very little anti-intellectual sentiment. Because I think that was something I noticed when I moved to the UK when I was 9 years old. Is where I went to school in Zimbabwe, there were academic awards that had the equivalent prestige to being like captain of the football team or something. Bristol, no, they don't do that.
Your academic reward was getting beaten up at lunch break.
Yes. So yeah, but no, giving kids 10 books ain't gonna make them smart. And I mean, there's probably the odd kid who's like, all right, these are the 10 books I will need, and now I can plot my escape. But correlation versus causation.
Yes, indeed.
All right. So we got a bunch of things. We've done 32 minutes of the show, and we haven't even started looking at the topics for this week.
Well, that was a topic. I did have that on the shortlist thing. I'll move it.
Oh, there it is. Yes, I've just moved it.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh, you did. Oh, we both moved it. That's going to crash Trello.
No, it won't. It's eventually consistent.
There we go.
Moving cards is idempotent in Trello. Yes.
Hurrah for that.
Yeah, Trello is very good because it was built by the people who built Fog Creek. Fogbugs, Joel Spolsky and his team.
Right, cool.
And then it got bought by Atlassian, and now you need an Atlassian account to log into it, which is sad.
Oh well.
But yeah.
So, have you got the good, the bad, and the bugly for this week?
I do, I think. Hang on. I'll need to give it a little thought. Let's do the good, the bad, and the bugly. I'm going to play the music.
I do love some Ennio Morricone. Ennio Morricone? Not enough to know his name. Ennio.
Yeah, Ennio Morricone.
Yes.
The good, the bad, and the bugly. What's your good this week?
My good this week is JetBrains Rust rover. Because I've been doing a little bit of fiddling with Rust and kind of going, could I build things with Rust for something I'm building? And for ages, the most difficult thing about Rust had been that there wasn't a proper IDE for it. Not like a dedicated kind of, this is a Rust IDE. There was Sea Lion, which is JetBrains C++ thing, and then you could install the Rust plugin, but they've now done it as a standalone. It is just a Rust IDE. It just came out of preview. And so I thought I would mention it because it's amazing. So where normally, because I've been sort of dallying with Rust for a while, and one of the things I always say I like about it is the compiler error messages, because they're so friendly and gentle and helpful. And Rust Rover kind of puts them into the editor as red squiggles and orange squiggles and everything. And so that's my good for this week.
What's my
and then
okay, go for it.
What's your? I'll do. So my bad this week is APIs that are actually RabbitMQ using X509 certificates for mutual TLS authentication. I'm not going to go into it. Just take it from me. It's very, very bad. Very bad. And then the bugly is that currently comments on issues on GitHub aren't working because the issue comment ID is a 32-bit integer, and they've just had their 2,147,000,000 and whatever it is issue comment on GitHub. And so that decision that somebody made all those many years ago when designing a database table has finally blown up in their face, if they're still there.
So I have an idea floating around for something that might become a conference talk, which is about predictable failures.
Yes.
And it's about things where, you can, what I want to do is kind of go through them in order of precision and end up with the number of times that a certificate has expired that had an expiry date stamped into it that was there for anybody to look at any time in the last 10
Yep.
years, and nobody ever did. And then there's like domain names expiring, but one of them is, when are you going to run out of integers? And this is I had an incident with this in and the lesson I learned. So we designed a system that we knew was going to do this. We did a bit of kind of back of the envelope calculation, and we're like, we got about 4 years before we overflow 2 to the 32 or 2 to the 31 actually. Let's use big ints for it. So we did. We wired up the database and the core system. But of course, then what happened is we had 5 years of people coming in and integrating with it, and they were using Entity Framework and they were using Hibernate, and it was just mapping this thing to an int, and it worked. And then,
Yes.
5 years, 3 months, 4 days or something. Like we were within a couple of weeks with our back of the envelope calculation as to when it was going to blow up. And what we realized is that if you are using a 64-bit integer, you should seed it with a number that is too big to go in a 32-bit integer. Because then anybody who plugs into that data set, it's going to blow up in their face on day one, which is kind of the whole, the agile, like if it's going to fail, make it fail now, not later. Ship it, make it, the thing which you otherwise would find out in 5 years. Is there any way you can get it done before lunch? And, I think about that a lot now. Like I'm teaching a workshop in Oslo at NDC next week about, doing advanced ASP.NET development with .NET 8 and, building all kinds of stuff on top of ASP.NET and Entity Framework. And one of the things that I show in that is to seed your data model with the worst possible edge cases. Like if you've got a varchar 50 in your database, then one of your test records should be a 50-character long name, so that every time you ever look at a screen, you're like, oh, that doesn't fit. Oh, that's breaking. Oh, no, that's going to push the formatting. That won't fit on a PDF. That won't do this. Put a SQL injection attack in the first record you ever create, because then you won't get surprised when someone puts it in 6 months later and you go, oh, we didn't think of that. And it's all the stuff that would never occur to somebody who was motivated by just kind of focusing on the golden path. And that's something that I think is a perennial challenge, is you get smart people who know what they're doing, trying to build a system that does something, and it's very counterintuitive to think of all the ways in which it could break. What you do is people tend to think of the ways in which it will work, and they build those and they test those, and it's lovely and it's wonderful. And then SQL injection or cross-site scripting attacks or overflows or, oh crap, we didn't think anyone was going to paste Hebrew into that box. And so, do it up front, put them in the test data that you boot your database with on day one, and see what blows up.
Chaos engineering.
Yeah. I love me a bit of chaos engineering.
Yes.
The good, the bad, and the bugly. I'm going to start with the bad because I haven't thought of the good yet. So on Monday night, all my websites vanished. And I got back. We'd been taking the cat to Claire's mum's place because the cat is staying in Canterbury while we're in Norway next week. And I got back and I just want to update something. And I put things on the internet because then I'd have to remember where I left them. So I have various things on like dylanbt.net. All of the Linebreakers songs are actually in a hidden folder on linebreakers.band, so I don't need to remember what they're in. And I went to I was like, oh, that's weird. I can't get to it. And I checked a couple of things and went through and discovered I couldn't. So all of my websites that are hosted on GitHub pages, I couldn't see them on broadband or mobile, but I could see them on a different mobile, and I could see them over a VPN. And it's like, it's like, okay, there's a border gateway protocol routing problem at BT OpenReach or something. And I gave up and went to bed. And the next morning, I still couldn't get to any of them, and started digging and found the British Telecom, or the BT forums, somebody said, oh, it looks like Spamhaus has blocked GitHub pages. And so GitHub pages has 4 IP addresses, and those 4 are shared by every single website on github.io, which is github.io itself. It's the official download page for the GitHub desktop client. It's brew.sh, so the homebrew stuff is hosted on there. Thousands of sites. And BT had gone, oh no. And the frustrating thing, I talk about this in my little YouTube video that's going to come out on Monday, is that what they did is they just blocked the traffic. So I got error connection timed out, which is something is broken, not a somebody has decided. And that I found really frustrating because, if I had Monday night, I'd been like, you can't get to here because BT OpenReach says that Spamhaus says that there's an IP address with malware. What would probably have happened is I'd have got a message saying BT OpenReach says this site has malware, because I don't think they'd have grasped the nuance of an IP address being shared by 5,000 different websites. But yeah, and that was just one of those, I don't like spamhaus.org. I know they're well-intentioned and they think they're doing a good job, but the whole idea that you can get an IP address blocked and then somebody like BT OpenReach will stop all of, and they provide broadband and, backbone services to PlusNet, to EE, to a whole bunch of, people, and probably millions of people in the UK get on the internet via BT OpenReach. So yeah, if you want to mess something up for all of them, you just got to get an IP address put on spamhaus.org and BT will stop routing to it for all of those customers.
I think the problem is not Spamhaus particularly. It's BT just going, if Spamhaus say bad, then bad, block.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
That's not what you should be doing when you are responsible for probably 75% of the internet for the British public. With the other 25% being almost exclusively Virgin Media, because it's been working fine for me. I haven't had any problems.
So weirdly, I got a failover router which is on 3. I've got a 3. So 3 is the name of the network, which is a stupid name. All mobile phone companies are stupid. The 2 I have are 3 and EE. And I'm like, those are terrible names for anything by any metric. But 3 was fine. So wherever 3 are routing their traffic to, it's not going through BT OpenReach, which I think is worth knowing, for future reference.
So that was your bad.
So the Bugly, I just want to talk about an error message, which I loved because it was so dramatic. I have been working through, so we've got about 2.5 hours worth of Line Breakers songs, which are average 4 minutes each. And I have been going through and kind of remastering all of them and making sure that the video lines up with the lyrics we actually perform now, and like replacing MP3 drum tracks with actual, drum designer in Logic so that the acoustics are better and everything. And I'm in After Effects, and I got to publish to export one of these videos, and it says there's a catastrophic error, and then up comes a dialogue saying, "You have one chance to save your project." And I'm like, that's a little dramatic. And I'm like, okay. And it says, don't use the same file name, because obviously it's like, I don't know what's happened. So I'm like, okay, save it as yada yada -failure dot whatever. And then I try to quit, and it says, you have one chance to save your project. And I save it again, and I quit again, and it goes, you have one chance.
Yes.
And I'm like I've had 5 chances to save my project before I quit. 1, I can't quit. And 2, I've had many more chances than the one I was told I was going to have. So that was just a cute little interesting bug.
Yes.
But actually, good. Adobe After Effects continues to astonish me at how capable it is. It is just, the learning curve, I remember trying to figure that out, and I still probably only understand about 25% of what it can do. But it is a phenomenally capable piece of software. Just the number of things that you're like, can I make this text spin in there? And then I want it to pulse so that when the drums are loud, it gets transparent. And when the drums are quiet, it's fully opaque. And it's like, oh yeah, add one of those, filter this, link that to that, and boom, done. And you're like, oh.
It's
So,
phenomenal. Some of the software that we own, because
yeah,
I don't have Creative Cloud, but I have Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer
yeah,
for instead of Photoshop and Illustrator,
yeah,
and I have Wondershare Filmora for doing video things.
yeah,
And those, I mean, they all have buttons. I don't know what that button does. They have menu
yeah,
item. Don't know what that does. And I have used the Creative Cloud stuff, and I would say I've probably used like 5% of Photoshop, maybe
yeah,
10% of Illustrator, 10% of Premiere, and I just don't need
yeah.
everything that it does, but it's all there for me. And
Is
I do
there? So,
wonder, is there anybody anywhere in the world who knows everything about a piece of software that they use every day? Is there
so
someone
I
who
was
has
I
used
was about
every
to
feature of
ask.
Photoshop?
Yeah, I was about to ask what package, what application do you think you know the highest percentage of its available features?
Notepad.
Because I think I probably know PowerPoint better than like you put me in a room with 200 people at a conference, I'd put money on knowing PowerPoint better than all of them.
Yeah.
Because I have used PowerPoint to do so many things that people come up afterwards and go, "How do you make your presentations?" And you're like, "PowerPoint," and they're like, "Really?" And you're like,
Yes.
"Yes." And and yeah,
If
PowerPoint
you've
is
never
one of
seen one of Dylan's presentations, the fact that they are just done entirely in PowerPoint or nearly entirely in PowerPoint,
yeah.
just using PowerPoint features, if you actually see what his slides do, that is quite impressive.
And
Trust me.
PowerPoint is definitely the application where I'm like, I know what every single button on every single one of these menus does and when to use it. And it's also the thing where I know, like, I'll have a picture in my head. I always sort of storyboard my presentations so I know what I want to happen visually at any point in it. And it's been a long time since I've been like, oh, I don't know if PowerPoint can do that. And now it's like, that's PowerPoint, 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 Camtasia, PowerPoint, After Effects, PowerPoint, PowerPoint, done.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's I like the certainty of being like, yep, I just know what I need to do. Let's go to work.
Yeah.
But no,
I don't.
Photoshop, I don't know, maybe 50%, After Effects 25.
Yeah.
Illustrator is full of things that just piss me off because they don't work the way they should, because CorelDRAW is how things should work.
No deluxe paint.
With King Tutankhamun's death mask on the box.
And then you could turn on color cycling, and it would sort of make him go way yes. Which the fact that the Paint Shop Deluxe Paint 2 was available to me at the same time as Mushrooms is just one of those things where life beautifully syncs things up for you, because it's just drink the mushroom tea and then just turn on color cycling.
On Windows 95, when you first booted it up, you'd get a VGA, so 320 by 200, 256 color screen with Windows 95 and a sort of blue sky with some clouds in it, and a little bar across the bottom that strobed.
Yes.
That was palette cycling. That was, it rotated the first 10 entries in the color palette. And if you knew that, you could replace your Windows 95 loading screen with a picture of Eddie from Iron Maiden and his eyes would flash.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
But there's some good comments in the chat. So yes, Eli and Origami Marie both talking about people who make art in Excel, because of course they do, because Excel is an operator. Excel is like Emacs.
Yeah.
It's an operating system. You can do everything in Excel. I've been watching people on YouTube making Tetris and actually quite complicated video games. Excel is a game engine kind of things. And yeah, Origami Marie says there's a guy who uses the vector drawing capability of Excel to make beautiful art. And everyone's first question is, Excel has vector drawing? I didn't know Excel had vector drawing. That was just,
I think I just learned that now. I mean, like, I guess it must, because I've drawn lines on top of charts in Excel to be like, look at that thing there.
Yes. But I don't remember doing any Bezier curves.
But there is one of those. Why would you do that other than just for the sheer art of doing it?
Yes, but that is reason enough in this day and age.
Yeah,
there's artificial intelligence might be able to generate amazing pictures by subtracting bits of other pictures or whatever it is that it does. I'm trying to learn this stuff at the moment and I can't.
yeah.
But AI cannot yet make vector art in Excel because they haven't taught it how to use Excel. It can play Atari video games and just keep pressing buttons until it works out which ones seem to make the score go up, and then it presses those some more and all that sort of thing. But yeah, if artificial intelligence is going to take all the fun bits, then we have to work out new ways of doing the fun bits to make them more fun.
Artificial intelligence will only take the fun bits if you let it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not gonna.
And I think that fundamentally, art is not created because somebody requested art. Art is created because the artist had no choice but to make it. They were compelled to do so.
Yes.
And that's the, people are like, oh, AI is going to steal all these, jobs. Most people I know who make art or music for a living make art they hate for advertising companies and music they hate for jingles.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, it sucks, but it's not destroying the art, it's destroying the commerce.
Yes. And apparently quite a lot of the work for session musicians is playing on jingles.
Yeah.
And it's you sort of think, oh, it's this great life of just hanging around in recording studios and doing drugs and getting drunk and then going off and doing live gigs. And it really isn't. It's just as bad as everything else.
I think, anything that you have to do because you got bills to pay is going to end up sucking.
Yeah. I did see a great meme this week about AI. So I want AI to do my cooking and cleaning and laundry so that I have time to make music and art. Turns out AI is actually going to make music and art so that I have time to do my cooking and cleaning and laundry. That's not the right way round.
Yeah. I mean, that maybe speaks to the fact that most people who are excited about AI don't actually really know what they're looking at or listening to when they look at music and art. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's convincing. And if you got it to do their laundry, they'd be like, this is wrong. Like, this is horrible. Why is anyone getting excited about this? Like, it's literally shredded my socks.
Yes.
And it's cooked me a delicious pasta with ball bearings and glue. And
also, I get the feeling that most of the people who are currently excited about AI and going on about it, I don't think they do their own laundry. I think they have people. It's just a theory. I haven't got any.
So I sort of have two data points on this, and one is the tech bros getting all excited, which they have to because line got to go up. But the other one is, group chats with friends of mine who are just on things like Midjourney, and they're just playing with it to see what it can do. And the thing about that is that the value of what they create is in the bonding experience of all of us looking at it and laughing together.
Yeah.
And, I think that has tremendous value as a sort of funny art. It's like finding funny memes on the internet back in the days when the internet was new and you hadn't seen all the funny pictures on it yet. And the laugh, you'd look at the picture and be like, that's funny, but actually thinking, I can't wait to show this to the rest of the gang. And you show it to them and they laugh and you laugh and they laugh. And then 3 days later, someone makes a joke about it and you all laugh again.
Yes.
And Marie, lol, women's work is hard. Oop, I hit the wrong link there. Yeah. I got a book called How to Get Things Really Flat because, I went out and I was like, I need to buy a book about how to clean houses because it just always frustrated me that it seemed so horrendously unoptimized. Like, you think about ironing, right? Like, every ironing board I've ever owned is a piece of shit that would not last 15 seconds if it was in an environment where macho manly men are doing macho things and be like, oh, well, this is too flimsy. Go and get me one made out of pig iron and carbon fiber. And then they'd be like, yeah, it's basically now you're ironing on an anvil, and it's really easy because it doesn't flex every time you press it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just, I'm constantly astonished that, so many, the tooling that exists for so much domestic maintenance. I want a mop that actually mops floors. And I've read the manual.
Can't remember the last time I ironed anything.
Yeah, I don't do it anymore.
It's because I wear t-shirts and jeans, and they don't need be and shouldn't be ironed.
I moved house in 2018, and I realized in 2021 that I had forgotten to bring the ironing board.
Yeah.
And that was because I needed to iron a green screen.
Yes, those need ironing. So I'm gonna. I made an intro bit for this, and we're running out of time, but I am going to talk about it because it happened like 2 hours ago and it was awesome. So intro bit.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes, no, SpaceX have done a thing.
What did they do?
They launched, they did their flight test 4 for Starship and the Super Heavy booster. And it soared majestically into the sky with only one of 33 engines on the main booster failing. And then they got up into space, and they did the hot staging of the second of the Starship, which means it lights its engines while it's still attached to the booster and then breaks off. And they have a whole kind of layer of the booster that's designed to withstand this. And then they jettison that because it's heavy and it makes the booster top heavy. So they just get rid of it and let it burn up in the atmosphere. And then the booster they call it the boost back burn. It's the thing that slows it down so it starts to fall. And then it used its fins to bring itself down vertically. And then it hovered for a few seconds about 35 miles off the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. And then it just dropped gently into the water, exactly as it was supposed to do. Because they didn't want to try and land it when they actually get this whole thing working. What it will do is it will fly back to the tower that it launched from, and it will hover there, and then these 2 chopsticks will come in from either side, and then it will drop, and the chopsticks will catch it by its upper fins. And if they tried to do that on, let's say, flight test 3, they would have lost the launch tower and had to build a new one. So they wanted to make sure that they could do this before they did it next to the launch tower. And so today they did that. I suspect they'll probably do another one like that, or bring it back and do something. I don't think they'll risk their launch tower on it. But then Starship, this was the best bit. Last time, Starship it exploded in space. It was trying to re-enter, and then they lost contact and it exploded. This time it made it all the way through the atmosphere with all the heat and everything. But on the video feed, the only external camera that seemed to be working all the way through the atmosphere was just above one of the fins at the front of the Starship. And these are actually, they've got motors that came from Tesla for doing the adjustment. They were hydraulic, but they're now direct drive electric motors. And so as much as possible of it is covered in heat shield and to withstand the thing, but it's traveling at 15,000 kilometers an hour through air. And when you press air together at that velocity, you turn it into plasma. And plasma is really, really, really hot. Plasma is what they're trying to control inside nuclear fusion chambers. And the whole ship is just being absolutely smashed with just huge amounts of plasma. And you can see where the heat shielding is either a bit of it's broken off, or it's just, that's a hinge. How do you heat shield a hinge? And so this fin is just shedding tiny little bits, and sparks are flying off all over the place. All these things are happening, and you're thinking, well, this is done for. After about a minute and a half of watching this fin take this punishment, it moved, and it still was able to sort of move the correct amount. And they brought the starship down, and it did its flip thing, and it brought itself back to vertical, and it fell into the Indian Ocean. And it was just the most amazing thing I think I've seen so far this year. It was all just absolutely incredible, and I'm so excited. And I wish that almost anybody else on Earth owned SpaceX, so that I could be genuinely happy about it with no conflict.
Yeah. Welcome to life.
Yes, I think the only other person I wouldn't want to own SpaceX would, well, you know, I can probably think of a few, but Jeff Bezos wouldn't. I wouldn't want him to own it either. But yes, anyway, there you go. That was my thing that I really had to talk about, because it is just awesome. It is fantastic what they're doing, and everybody is just so happy. You see the shot of them all in the control room, and literally the entire company has turned up, and every single one of them jumping up and down and waving their arms and everything. And it's just fantastic to see what human beings can do when they work together.
So I just want to come back. Jake put something in the chat a few minutes ago that I want to pick up, which is about Excel. And this is about Excel was responsible for what I think was one of the biggest software mishaps ever.
Oh, well, I need to know about this.
Now, it was the COVID thing, and I actually know what happened here, because the news headline, the mainstream media coverage, said that loads of COVID cases of people testing positive for COVID were not getting registered because of, first there was because of a bug in Excel, and then there was like, no, it's not a bug, it's a limit. They have a 65,000 row export limit. Now, the thing that actually happened, neither of the teams that were doing actual statistical analysis and everything, they weren't using Excel. But Excel was the only format that their two systems had in common. So the only way they had to exchange data was, one of them said, oh, we can export it as an Excel spreadsheet. And the other ones went, let's send it over. We'll see if we can open it. Yeah, okay, we can import that. Yeah, off we go. And actually, I think, if I recall correctly, it wasn't a row limit, it was a column limit, because the format was exporting one column per case.
Yes,
something weird about it, like, which is not how you add new cases to the bottom of the list, not to the side of the list. So yeah, and that was, a sort of classic example of the level 1 reporting, there's a bug in Excel. Level 2 reporting, it's not a bug, it's a limitation. Level 3 reporting, and actually they weren't using Excel to do analysis. They just, needed a data format, and Excel is ubiquitous, and because most things can read it and most things can write it, which I thought was very interesting. I remember reading about that at the time and thinking, and it's one of those, how would you notice? Because when they first started doing this, there were not enough cases that you were ever going to notice the limit. And when you did, it didn't have an error. It just went, oh, yeah, well, I just exported the first 65,000 and yeah, whatever,
Yeah.
But which takes us back to the idea of, if you're testing any kind of system, figure out what are your limits and then go beyond that on day one to see what happens when you do.
Right, we're just out of time, so I want to sign off this week with a question for the audience, and if I remember, then when I publish this through Spotify, I'll put it as is there a question you want to ask your audience that they ask you at the end? Because this occurred to me this week. Why aren't drummers called drummists?
Yeah.
Because you're a guitarist.
Yes.
I'm a bassist.
Yes.
Bagheef is a pianist or a keyboardist. I've seen keyboardist use.
Yes.
I'm not sure. Eli, are you a hornist, or because if when you get your snazzy violin, Eli, you will be a violinist. It's always ist, flautist, and everything, but no drummer
and singer. They're not singists. vocalist, but singer.
But they do have vocalist. There is no ist for drum. You have percussionist, but to me, percussionist is like xylophones and glockenspiels
and a timpanist.
And a yes.
Yeah.
And a cymbalist, probably, if they're just the one thing.
I have no idea, but yes.
So yes, Eli says, "Oh God, this is a whole thing." So yeah, there you go. Maybe we can talk more about that when we will actually be with Eli and doing a live show from NDC Oslo, probably with most of the line breakers from somewhere like the JetBrains booth or something on the NDC Expo floor.
Yeah. We're not actually going to do that. We're going to do it with 2 people talking because I have 2 wireless microphones. And when we've done it before with a table full of people shouting at wireless microphones, it doesn't work very well.
But people will be in the background doing
there will be a live audience. We can do a kind of ask us anything.
Mum. Yes. So yes, be sure to tune in next week for that, whether you're watching live on YouTube or listening on the podcast or watching after the event on YouTube. We will be live from NDC. We will probably be exhausted because it's a week. But yeah, thanks as always for listening to us.
And if any of you is in Norway next week or in Norway all the time, including next week, come to Brugata on Friday night because we are playing a free show. We're doing an NDC Oslo after party and it's free and there's beer and there's music and comedy and nerds and t-shirts and merch and stickers and it'll be amazing and it'll change your life. And
this will be the first place it's possible to buy a Line Breakers t-shirt. And in years to come, those will be worth a fortune, obviously.
Yes.
So yeah. So if you can make it to that, do.
Folks, take it easy. Have a good week. I'm going to find the outro music. There's the outro music.
Yay.
You take it easy. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.